Serena Walker had been driving for hours. The stretch of highway under the dark Louisiana sky, endless and tiring. She wasn't in a hurry, just another trip back to New Orleans after a business meeting. The hum of the engine and the quiet night kept her company as she navigated the empty roads. She pulled into the gas station off the interstate, its flickering neon sign casting a pale light over the lot. A few cars were parked at the pumps, and the dull buzz of fluorescent lights spilled from the convenience store. Serena wasn't looking for anything special, just to refuel and grab a drink, a brief stop before continuing her journey. As she stepped out of the car, the humid air stuck to her skin, a reminder of the Louisiana heat. She stretched her back, feeling the fatigue from the long drive. Serena's jeans and hoodie made her blend in, just another traveler passing through. But there was something about this place, something that made her feel watched. She didn't react right away. Instead, Serena scanned the area, trusting her instincts. There weren't many people, an older man pumping gas, a woman sitting in her car scrolling on her phone, but her eyes landed on them. 3 bikers leaned against their motorcycles at the far end of the lot. They weren't pumping gas or buying anything. They were watching her, the way they whispered among themselves, the subtle movements. Serena recognized the look. It was the same one she had seen countless times before. They were sizing her up, deciding if she was an easy target. Her hand remained steady on the pump, but her mind was already working, calculating the situation. She'd been in situations like this before. 3 men probably looking to intimidate her, but she wasn't easy prey. Serena kept her movements calm, even as she felt their eyes on her. The leader of the group finally approached. He was tall, his broad arms covered in faded tattoos, his graying beard adding years to his face. He moved slowly, deliberately, his boots making a soft thud against the pavement. Serena could feel the shift in the air, the weight of his presence. He was used to being the biggest threat in the room. "Hey, nice ride," he said, his voice low and casual. Serena didn't flinch. "Thanks," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. The biker took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Where are you headed?" "Just passing through," she said, her voice steady. The man smirked, leaning in. "You sure you're in the right place? This isn't exactly the safest part of town for a woman traveling alone." Serena's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "Didn't see a sign that says that." The biker chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "Look, my boys and I are a little low on cash. You wouldn't mind helping us out, would you?" Serena didn't blink. She had been through this before. They were testing her, trying to figure out if they could intimidate her. She stayed still, her hand relaxed on the pump, her mind already calculating the best way to handle the situation. She wasn't going to give in. The silence between them stretched. She didn't make the first move, waiting to see if they would back down. But the biker wasn't done. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping a notch. "How about you hand over that wallet before things get unfriendly?" Serena didn't react to his threat, but she could see the other 2 bikers moving slightly in the background. The leader's words were just a prelude. She knew the next step was coming. She could already feel the tension, the moment when the situation would shift. The leader of the bikers stepped closer, his presence heavy in the air. Serena didn't flinch, but she could feel the tension building. She wasn't an amateur when it came to reading a situation like this. The bikers were looking for a fight, and she wasn't about to give them an excuse. "Where are you from?" he asked, still trying to keep his tone casual, but Serena could hear the underlying edge in his voice. It was no longer a friendly conversation. He was probing, testing, trying to gauge her reaction. "New Orleans," she replied, keeping her voice even, her eyes locked on his. She wasn't going to show fear. Not now. The leader nodded, looking her up and down as if deciding if she was worth the trouble. "Yeah, well, New Orleans is a long way from here. You might have taken a wrong turn. This ain't exactly friendly territory." Serena exhaled slowly, her gaze never wavering. "I didn't see a sign that said that." The biker let out a low chuckle, but there was no amusement in it. He was sizing her up, testing how far he could push. Serena could feel his eyes flicker to her hoodie pocket, where her wallet was tucked inside. It was subtle, but she noticed. The glint of interest in his gaze told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a robbery in the making. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a mockingly friendly tone. Look, we've had a long night, and my boys and I could really use a little pick-me-up, if you catch my drift. He nodded toward her wallet. You wouldn't mind helping us out, would you? Serena's hand tightened just slightly around the gas nozzle, but her face remained calm, unaffected. She had been in enough situations like this to know exactly what they were trying to do. The bikers thought she was just a lone woman, an easy target. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I don't think you want to do this, she said evenly, her eyes narrowing slightly. The leader laughed, a cold, humorless sound that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Oh yeah? And why's that? Serena didn't flinch, didn't take a step back. She knew better than to make her next move too soon. She didn't need to escalate it yet, but she was ready. Because I'm not the kind of person you want to mess with. The leader looked at her for a moment, eyes narrowing, clearly trying to decide if she was bluffing. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Serena didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. She knew what was coming next, and she was ready for it. The other two bikers were hanging back, but Serena could see them shifting, moving slightly. The one on the left was twitchy, glancing around as if waiting for some sign from their leader to jump in. The other one, taller and quieter, just stood there watching. They were waiting for their cue, ready to act the moment things escalated. The leader took another step forward, his voice dropping. You talk real tough for someone standing alone at a gas station. How about you hand over that wallet before things get ugly? Serena's mind was already working, running through the possibilities. The bikers weren't too coordinated yet, which meant they were testing the waters. They were feeling her out. They were waiting for her to show weakness. She wouldn't. I'm not giving you anything, she said, her tone hardening slightly. The leader smirked, and for a moment, Serena saw the brief flash of doubt in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. He was pushing to see how much he could take, but this time, he wasn't sure he could take it all. That slight hesitation was all she needed. Without another word, the two bikers behind him started to move. It was almost slow motion, their bodies shifting, their hands reaching for something. Serena's heart rate didn't change. She wasn't panicking. She was just waiting for the right moment. The first one lunged. The first biker charged at her, swinging his fist in a wide arc toward her face. Serena had already read the move. He was too predictable. He didn't have the composure to be a real threat, just a man trying to force his hand with sheer aggression. Serena stepped aside at the last moment, feeling the air shift as the punch missed by inches. She wasted no time. As the biker stumbled past her, off balance, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it sharply behind his back. His breath hitched in pain as she bent his arm at an unnatural angle, forcing him to the ground with a sudden snap. He yelped, but Serena didn't let up. She kicked his knee from behind, sending him crashing to the pavement with a grunt. The man groaned, clutching his arm and rolling onto his side, trying to push himself up. But he wasn't going anywhere. He was already out of the fight. Serena didn't pause to watch him. She'd already seen the second biker, the one on the right, hesitate. He wasn't sure if he should attack her or help his friend. That hesitation was all Serena needed. With swift precision, she pivoted, bringing her elbow up into his ribs before he could make a move. He gasped, his hands clutching his side, and she followed with a sharp blow to his throat. The man staggered back, his wind knocked out of him, gasping for air. He crumpled to the ground, unable to get his breath back. The fight was nearly over before it even began. Serena's eyes flicked to the leader of the group. He stood frozen, his hands twitching near his waistband. The knife was already halfway out of his jacket before Serena even took a step toward him. He lunged, the blade flashing in the harsh fluorescent light above them. But Serena had already anticipated the move. She sidestepped with ease, grabbing his wrist mid-swing, twisting it with practiced precision until the knife clattered to the pavement. The leader growled, his teeth gritted, but it was too late. Serena's movements were fluid, controlled, like she'd done this 100 times before. She landed a quick, powerful blow to his gut, forcing the air out of him in a painful wheeze. His knees buckled, but he stayed upright for a second longer, just enough for Serena to deliver 2 more strikes. One hit his throat, the other slammed into the side of his head. The leader's body snapped back and forth with each hit. He stumbled, his hands flailing as he tried to regain balance. But it was no use. With one final strike, A clean punch to his jaw. He collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. The entire fight took less than 10 seconds. The bikers, now sprawled across the concrete, groaned and writhed, unable to stand. The gas station lot had fallen eerily silent. Serena rolled her shoulders, taking a deep breath. She wasn't out of breath. She wasn't even shaken. This wasn't the first time she'd had to defend herself, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But still, the quietness of the moment left her with an uncomfortable sense of finality. The old man filling his truck had stopped, mouth open, eyes wide. The woman in her car had frozen, her phone still in hand, staring through the windshield. Serena could feel their gaze, but she didn't pay them much mind. She wasn't looking for attention. She just wanted to get out of there. The sound of the clerk inside the store, likely on the phone with the authorities, cut through the silence. Serena glanced down at the three men on the ground, two groaning, one unconscious, all out of commission. The leader stirred slightly, shaking his head, blood dripping from his lip. His eyes flicked up to Serena with a mixture of rage, humiliation, and something else. Fear. She could see it in his eyes now. He hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated a fight with someone who could handle herself. But there was no time for that. Serena turned her back on him, glancing around to make sure there were no other surprises. The sirens could already be heard in the distance, getting closer with every passing second. The bikers were defeated, but the night wasn't over. Not yet. The leader of the bikers wasn't done. Serena could see the fire in his eyes as he pushed himself onto his hands and knees, trying to shake off the blow to his head. His lip was split, blood trickling down his chin, but he wasn't willing to accept defeat. He blinked hard, trying to clear the haze in his mind. The anger in his eyes grew, but so did something else. Fear. He wasn't used to being on the receiving end of a beating. Not like this. He struggled to stand, his legs shaky, but determination etched into his face. Serena took a slow step back, watching him carefully. Her muscles were loose, controlled, but she wasn't about to underestimate him. The man was desperate, and desperate people did stupid things. The moment his hand dipped into his jacket, she knew what he was reaching for. Serena didn't wait for him to pull out the gun, or whatever else he was hoping to use. She was already moving. As the leader reached for his pocket, his weight shifting forward, Serena grabbed his wrist with a quick, fluid motion, twisting it harshly until he let out a grunt of pain. She yanked him toward her, using his own momentum against him, and drove her knee into his ribs. The impact was enough to force the air out of his lungs in a choked gasp. The leader stumbled back, his arms flailing for balance, but Serena didn't give him a chance to recover. She planted her foot firmly into the ground, pivoted, and slammed her elbow into the side of his head. He staggered again, his body lurching sideways, but his legs were too wobbly to hold him up. With a final shove, Serena hooked her leg behind his knee, pulling him forward with enough force to send him crashing to the pavement. His back hit the concrete with a sharp thud, the wind knocked out of him. He groaned, his body crumpling in defeat. The leader wasn't getting up this time. Serena exhaled slowly, stepping back to give him some space. Her breathing was steady. She wasn't concerned about the fight anymore. It was over. But there was still one more left. The biker who had attacked first, the one she had taken down with a wrist lock, was now trying to push himself up on shaky legs. His face was twisted with a mix of rage and embarrassment. The fight was lost, but the desperation was still there, and he wasn't ready to give up. He grabbed a tire iron from the side of his motorcycle and charged at Serena with a wild, uncoordinated swing. Serena let him come closer, waiting for him to commit to the strike. He swung the tire iron at her side, aiming for her ribs. Serena shifted just enough to let the swing pass by her, feeling the air cut by the heavy metal. In the same motion, she grabbed his wrist, yanking him forward and using his own momentum against him. With a twist, she forced his arm into a painful bend, snapping his elbow in the wrong direction. He screamed, dropping the tire iron as his arm crumpled beneath him. Serena shoved him once more, sending him crashing to the pavement with a grunt. 2 down. The last biker, the one who had hesitated, was the only one still standing. He looked around at his friends now on the ground, broken and defeated. His eyes flicked to Serena, and for the first time that night, he seemed to understand. This wasn't worth it. He raised his hands slowly, his body language signaling surrender. "Ain't worth it, man," he muttered, his voice hoarse from the previous strike to his throat. "We're done." Serena didn't respond right away. She studied him for a long moment, making sure he wasn't about to do something stupid. Finally, after a tense pause, she gave him a single nod. "Good decision," she said quietly. Behind her, the door to the car slammed shut, and Serena turned her head to see the woman from earlier, standing near her vehicle, phone still in hand. "I saw everything," she called out. "You're good, man." Serena didn't answer, her focus back on the three men on the ground. The leader groaned, trying to lift his head, his eyes filled with rage and humiliation. He spat blood onto the ground, cursing. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled. But Serena just shook her head. "I told you to walk away," she said, her voice low and steady. The sirens were growing louder now, and the sound of approaching police cars made the air seem even heavier. Serena didn't want to deal with them, didn't want to be caught up in the mess, but she knew what would happen next. She didn't need to stay. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the thick night air. Police cars arrived one by one, their red and blue lights flashing against the gas station windows. Two deputies stepped out, eyes scanning the scene before they approached. Serena didn't move. She stayed calm, her gaze fixed on the bikers still sprawled out on the pavement. The woman from the sedan, phone in hand, approached the officers. "I saw it all," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "She didn't start it. They jumped her first." The deputies took in the sight of the bikers, groaning on the ground, unable to get up. The leader was still coughing up blood, staring at them with a look of rage. "That's bullshit," he muttered. "She attacked us. We were just asking for some help, and she went crazy." Serena turned to him, meeting his glare with calm eyes. She didn't say a word, no need to. The older deputy, with a thick mustache, looked down at the leader, then back at Serena. His gaze softened as if he had seen enough of this type of situation to know what was going on. "You want to explain why two of you were carrying weapons?" he asked, pointing to the tire iron and the knife on the ground. The leader's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak, his anger brewing, yet unable to deny the evidence. The younger deputy looked at Serena. "You the one who did all this?" Serena nodded, her voice steady. "I defended myself." The older deputy studied her for a moment before glancing down at her ID when she handed it over. His eyes briefly flicked over it. "Army, huh?" he muttered under his breath. "Retired," Serena replied quietly. "I'm not looking for trouble." The deputy sighed and nodded. "Explains a lot," he muttered, looking at the bikers once more. "Pressing charges?" Serena hesitated. She had no desire to drag these men through the legal system, knowing full well they'd probably walk away with minimal consequences. They didn't deserve more attention. They needed a lesson in respect, not jail time. "Nah," she said. "I just want to get home." The deputy studied her for a long second, then nodded. "All right, finish your gas and get out of here. We'll handle them." Serena didn't argue. She turned back to the pump, her fingers working the nozzle without haste. The woman with the phone walked past Serena, still in awe. "You're amazing," she said, barely above a whisper. Serena didn't respond, her focus entirely on finishing what she started. Once the gas tank was full, she climbed back into her car, the sound of the door slamming softly behind her. As she started the engine, the police lights flickered in the rearview mirror. She didn't care to look at them anymore. This wasn't the end of her night, but it would soon be over. 2 days later, her phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, Serena ignored the calls, thinking they were just work emails or messages from old friends. But when she checked the notifications, her stomach tightened. A video, the gas station footage. The woman from the sedan had posted it online, and now it was everywhere. The caption, "Bikers messed with the wrong woman." Serena clicked on the video. The footage was shaky, but it captured the moment the bikers approached her, looking cocky, sizing her up. And the seconds that followed, the fight, every calculated move, every strike, the takedowns, all of it played out for the world to see. The comments flooded in. "Dude dropped them like it was nothing. Respect, she's military. Look at those moves. That's not just self-defense, that's training. She went too hard though. 3 against 1? Was that really necessary?" The debate was immediate. Some hailed her as a hero, someone who stood her ground. Others criticized her, questioning if it was excessive force. Serena didn't care what people thought. The internet was quick to judge, always twisting things. The media got involved, of course. News stations ran the footage, adding dramatic music, some calling her a vigilante, others questioning if she'd overdone it. The reports dug into her past. Army combat instructor, honorable discharge, no criminal record. Her job even got dug up. Journalists were calling for interviews. Her employer wasn't happy with the attention. They told her to lay low until things died down. Serena didn't want this. She just wanted to be left alone. But now her life was out there for everyone to dissect. Her phone buzzed again. She let it ring for a moment before answering. It was her mother. "Baby, I saw the video," her mother said, her voice soft with concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom," Serena said, rubbing her forehead. She wasn't used to all this attention. "I didn't start the fight." "I know," her mother said, "but the world, they don't always care about the truth." "I know." Serena took a deep breath. "I just didn't want to be a victim." Her mother sighed. "Sometimes people need to see the truth with their own eyes before they believe it." Serena let that settle in her mind for a moment. She had done what she had to do. The rest of the world could think what it wanted. The next day, Serena sat in her car, facing the camera on her phone. She turned it on, took a deep breath, and spoke into it. "I've been quiet about this, but I think it's time I said something," she began. "I'm not a hero. I'm not a criminal. I'm just a woman who didn't want to be a victim. What happened that night at the gas station was self-defense. That's it. No dramatics, no excuses." The video spread fast. People shared it, debated it, discussed it. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Some still criticized her, but many others understood. The conversation changed from one of violence to one of survival. In the end, Serena didn't care about going viral. What mattered was making sure people knew the difference between defending yourself and looking for a fight. Because in a world quick to judge, sometimes the truth needed to come straight from the source.